I don't know how I got in this room, to be quite frank, and I don't know if I've ever seen a panel like this on another show or in any context for that matter, with regard to the depth of knowledge, the experience, the wisdom, and the types of humans that you guys are in terms of what you guys are bringing to the table. But I have Cole Miller, Matt Larsen, Tom Kier on the Ironsides podcast. Guys, I'm super stoked to have you, and just right out of the gate, like, so thankful for you guys taking time out of your busy weekend and your day to be here at Combative Summit 2024 to sit with me and have a chat. Thanks for being here, guys.
Awesome.
Great to be here.
Yeah.
Quick intros for those people that don't know who some of these legends are, and that might not be something you want to hear or want to be referred to as, but I look at you guys as that in the spaces that you're coming from, and I know a lot of other people do. I have some intel on you from what I've been able to gather through things like social media or through my interviews of other people, both on and off air, reading, also, watching. There's some stuff out there on you guys, and my hope is that we can kind of dig into some stuff today beyond what maybe people know and beyond, and have a conversation beyond what people might expect this conversation to be, which, by the way, I have zero expectations. With this group, man, this could go a lot of different directions, so let's have fun with it. So I'm going to start down here on the end with Tom down there. Tom, kick us off, man.
Well, I've run SIAC Tactical Group for the last, 30 years almost. We started in the mid-90s, and I was already, I started off as a boxer, wrestler first, boxing later, and, had a propensity for, I enjoyed the combat. I enjoyed fighting. I enjoyed anything like that, right? So I got into some martial arts, kind of got led into by a friend of mine who I had also wrestled with. He was heavily into it, but I got into it with him, and it progressed. I'm not going to tell you my whole, boring story or anything, but I run SIAC Tactical Group for the last 30 some years. We still train mostly mill guys. We ended up getting into the SEAL community first, Naval Special Warfare. Spent a lot of time with those guys. Did a lot of stuff with the Dam Neck guys during the war. And, of course, naturally went down south with some of the guys on the Army side. Mm-hmm. And, it's been a great experience over this last 30 years or so. After 9/11, of course, everything really kicked off. So,
but sorry, can you talk just a little bit about what STG is, what they do, what they're training people for, or what they're training people to do?
We started off with just as an edge weapon. Okay. Basically taking people who carry knives, feel like they may be in situations that get pretty spicy, and be able to deploy that edge weapon effectively in those situations. So that was initially what we specialized in. But what happens is, we did a lot more than that, right? We did all kinds of different combative type things. And of course, when you really get into edge weapon work, you're not just doing edge weapon work. There's no real life application that is only using the blade. It would be super weird. It's not even a thing. Like, you're grabbing people, you're striking people, you're deploying blades, you are controlling, you're going to position, right? You're dealing with other weapons being brought online, other people being brought into the fight. So there's a lot of other things going into edge weapon work, right? There's no pure, we're not surgeons. But the thing is, so naturally that stuff comes out during the training. The guys that we're training were like, hey, well, let's do some more. Let's do some more of this.
It evolves.
Let's do more some of that, you know? So we did that. But also when these guys would deploy and they would come back, they would have questions. They would be like, hey, this happened. What do you think? How do you think I should do this? Or where should I carry this so that this is easier for me to deploy? All those questions happen. And we field those questions. And we do our homework. We work on different drills or different ways that we can help solve those problems for them. Mm-hmm. It gets pushed into the curriculum. They go downrange. Mm-hmm. They come back. They have more questions.
It evolves some more.
Yeah, and so the entire curriculum is not built by me. You know, we are managers of the curriculum, but it's really built by reality. It's built by situations that happen to these guys. It's built by the operators who come back and give us feedback. I don't know where it's going to go because you just don't, you know. We're just trying to answer the questions that reality is going to ask people. And by the way, reality is going to ask everyone questions. Mm-hmm. You can either answer them or with good answers or bad answers, and you'll be punished or rewarded, basically, how well you answer those questions. But so that's how it evolved, gotcha. You know. So we ended up starting to do everything. And then there was stuff that happened where they needed people to put hands on people and, like, capture them alive, right? Which is not something that they really do that much of. Mm-hmm. You know, and they were like...
The task changed.
Yeah, hey, can you do some of this? And we're like, sure. Mm-hmm. So then, you know, we're doing stuff that's like, doesn't even have any blades involved in it, but eventually. So anyway, that it evolves. We ended up doing all kinds of combatives. And we also did shooting stuff with all those mill guys too, because they end up having guys deploying in very low vis environments where they're just basically carrying a concealed pistol, maybe a concealed blade. Yep. And they do a lot of shooting of people, a lot of, fast roping and hitting doors, but carrying concealed in a dangerous city, like that's kind of what we do.
That was a different thing that they weren't doing before,
it was a change that happened in 2008, 2009, 2010. There was a huge low vis push by the mill.
Gotcha.
So they were still doing direct action kind of stuff, but there was a lot more low vis stuff happening. So we ended up showing them, like, well, here's what we do for our concealed carry stuff. Mm. And here's how we also use a blade involved in that. Mm-hmm. So, so entire curriculums kind of get built for those guys to play around with that stuff as well. So
I love that you're in it at a time. So a little bit of it's timing,
yeah,
right?
It is,
and a little bit of it's knowledge,
sure.
And it's also the ability to adapt and the trust that you built with the customer base, if you will, so for them to come back and help you adapt and evolve the thing.
Yeah,
I think that's going to be a common theme here as we move down the line and kind of talk to everybody, and because they're coming at it from different angles. They're coming at basically the same things. They're similar problems, but they're being solved different ways. So, Matt, let's take it to you. What can you just give us kind of the Reader's Digest version of who's Matt Larsen and where did he come from?
I was in the Marines when I was a teenager, and I didn't have any martial arts experience before that, but my first duty station was Tokyo, and so it kind of took off from there, and then started out in karate and judo, ended up boxing because karate wasn't that good, and then that turned into Muay Thai and Muay Thai and judo, and then whenever the UFC came along, started being jiu-jitsu. Mm-hmm. And in the meantime, I switched from the Marine Corps over into the Army. I switched over so I could go into special operations, went into 75th Ranger Regiment, and was there for about 12 or 13 years. And during that time, I basically taught my guys how to fight. They started being able to whip all the guys in the platoon, so we started training the company, then the whole battalion, then the entire Ranger Regiment, and then that sort of grew into the Army program. So when I left the Ranger Regiment, I went to start the Army hand-to-hand combat school at Fort Benning at the time.
Which didn't exist.
Correct. That was, yeah. So it's an interesting story that the Army's had hand-to-hand combat doctrine since, the 1850s. The first hand-to-hand combat manual was written by George McClellan when he was a captain, right? So
I did not know this.
I actually have a copy of the original, a first-generation copy printed in 1860 because they reprinted it.
That is awesome.
Yeah, it was originally from
lessons.
It was 1852 when he wrote it first when he was a captain, and then he was commander of the Army of the Potomac. So anyway,
amazing.
So there was no school, so to speak, in all that time. The Air Force actually had one back in the 50s.
Interesting.
But the Army didn't. And so they were kind of living off the doctrine from, the World War II era stuff, Sykes-Fairbairn and all that. And with various input from, hobbyist martial artists and whatnot. So what we did was we just took what we had developed in the Ranger Regiment, which at the beginning was just mostly jiu-jitsu, just Brazilian jiu-jitsu was kind of revolutionary in that it's easy to teach people, and therefore you can get people at a much higher level than nothing fairly quickly, So that I ran that for about probably 10 years or something like that, and then eventually I took my show on the road, and I went and set up programs for other agencies, other foreign organizations and allies and whatnot. And then about 8 years ago, after doing that for a while and, training sneaky guys and stuff. So
Secret squirrels.
Yeah. So I eventually, the West Point asked me to come run their program for them. So that's what I've been doing for the last 8 years is I'm the director of hand-to-hand combat training at West Point, where we mostly teach the students how to use hand-to-hand combat training, or how to develop programs within their own units, and then how to use it as a tool to inculcate the warrior ethos within their formations.
Got you.
So it's more of a leadership focus, although, hand-to-hand combat is it's the metaphor or the tool with which to do that primarily. But it's the same curriculum that grew out of, what was going on in the war and the Rangers and back during the war, it was a very similar story. Back during the war, we used to do post-action interviews with soldiers who would be in fights downrange. And there's a little bit of selection bias because most of the people were the guys we were training, that's how we knew where the stories happened and whatnot. So when somebody got in a fight, we'd go interview them and interview all the other people that were involved in their organization and whatnot. So we would, not just the story from the guy who's telling his own story, right? So, and then that's sort of, that's how it kind of grew out of just being jiu-jitsu over the years, is because we started seeing here's the demands of the battlefield, and here's what really goes down in these fights, and here's the sort of circumstances people find themselves in.
You got pressure tested in real life.
Yeah, exactly. And then we'd roll those back into the curriculum. So they're, to kind of give let me say one more thing before I go into that. So what has really come about over this time is my actual expertise has grown into being how to develop programs within units, or within units is a bad word, within organizations, because organizations have all their own cultural features. What's daily life like in that organization? What's your career look like in that organization? What are the gates that you're going to go through in your career? What are the schooling available? What are the jobs you're going to have as you progress, et cetera?
Super important.
Yeah. So how do you fit the training in so that it actually happens?
Yeah, and it's not a square peg in a round hole.
Right.
It's super hard to do.
Yeah, and most of them are the people who are interested in training. In the best units in the whole world, that number is still very small.
Yeah.
So how do you get the people who, are not interested in training? Well, first off, you understand why they're not interested in it. And second off, how do you design a program, that those guys all start to value it as well, and then gain the motivation to be able to train it. That's the actual challenge. So then that's what sort of became my expertise over time, is how do you do that? How do you evaluate a unit, make a program that works within the existing culture so that it will start to actually happen, and then will have a transformative effect on the culture over time, so that you end up with a unit that's going to win battles, or be successful at their mission is a better way to say it, right? Whatever it is, at the end of the day, you have to build, a warrior culture of excellence, where people have the value system that's going to make them successful across the spectrum of force, whatever their mission happens to be. And mostly, I would say that hand-to-hand combat is about that, and it has two major components, right? So first one is you've got to have a generic fighting ability that you build into everybody in the organization, so that socially they are expected to be a competent and tenacious fighter to be accepted by their peer group. Okay, so that's the first one. And then the second one is, then you have to develop a mechanism for them to be developing the techniques, tactics, and procedures, the TTPs, if you will. So for whatever their mission happens to be, because the missions vary, all these different kinds of organizations. Some of them are, there's law enforcement, there's sneaky people, there's direct action people, but there's also people who are just trying to not get dragged out of the cab of their truck, while they're, so how do you develop a culture that will lay that foundation of generic fighting ability, but then be able to not drift down the road of becoming a jiu-jitsu club or an MMA club, but develop one that's going to be focused on the mission and developing the TTPs and making sure that it propagate throughout the organization, in an effective way. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of it.
That's a large task. That is a tall order to fill.
Yeah. And I would say, most combatives programs fail, right? And they fail for predictable reasons. And those predictable reasons are the psychology of the people within the organization, and also the psychology and the knowledge base of the leadership, which are known elements. We can know whatever organization you're talking about. Here's the way regular people are, and here's what the leaders will know, and how would we educate them so that they could be successful at this task? Like I said, at those various gates along their way. Imagine, just to give a kind of an Army example, Army guys go to basic training, then they go serve the basic roles as a private. Then they go some point to a school before you become an NCO. Then they become an NCO, and then they serve these small level leadership roles. And then at some point they're in charge of from being in charge of 3 guys to being in charge of 9 guys to being in charge of 30 guys to being in charge of 150 guys to being in charge. You know what I mean? So each of those little gates, there's a different level of expertise needed in order to build an effective program within your organization.
Sure.
So it's easy to use the Army as a metaphor, but every organization has some similar culture. So how to get it where the knowledge base is there and it becomes self-fulfilling, so they're doing it without your help. You know what I mean? So
that's the hard part, right? That's the really hard part, is get them to do it.
I will tell you the hardest thing about it is all the influence from 10,000 sources of good information that all have nothing to do with that task.
Time out on that. All right, we're going to come back to that one. Right? We're coming back to that. All right, so the next dude we got up here is Cole Miller. You got a little bit of a different background.
Yeah, mine comes from more of the competitor background than the instructor background. I have some, but not like these two guys next to me. Lifelong adult martial artist, black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, black project in Muay Thai. I trained at American Top Team headquarters for 12 years, where I fought 10 years in the UFC, or 20 times there. USPSA B-class shooter, nothing special, but
that's pretty damn good.
I like this is my first year, but I like to compete. I like to shoot. I like to do stuff. I'm a martial arts instructor, combatives instructor. I have 2 schools in Middle Georgia, my own training company, and I'm a SOC-P instructor, Air Force Combatives Program Master Instructor. And I like to do stuff like this with guys like this and the great students that we had today. I'm all about the science of violence, as I say, and I'm obsessed.
So awesome. I think these guys are over here smiling and nodding like, yeah, that's me too, right? Like,
that's awesome.
Yeah,
what he said, right? Like, in a lot of ways. So interesting, just kind of a little story. Cole and I met, earlier this year. It was this year, or was it in the last year? I can't remember now. No, it was earlier this year. We were out in, I was out in South Georgia. You came down and we had a chat. I didn't know you were going to be there. You just kind of showed up. Was down there with our friends Mike and Fred.
That's right.
We were shooting out there in Blakely at the arena training facility. I'm sure you guys are very familiar.
It's a nice place.
And we were having a great time. This guy shows up. I don't know who he is. He just shows up to dinner, whatever. He says, "Hey, you know Cole Miller?" I go, "I don't know Cole Miller." And then then it was like, "Oh, that Cole Miller. Okay, cool." So he sits down. We have some dinner with the dog. What's the dog's name?
Dolly.
Dolly, right?
Yeah,
Dolly. Sweet dog.
My mini Aussie.
Yeah, she's amazing, right? She didn't like me at first, but we made up by the end. So there we got to talking, right? And so what I got into is like I wasn't really interested in his fight career or any of that stuff like that. I can read, right? That's there. I mean, I looked at it, right, and I knew a little bit about it, but not a lot. It was less about that, and it was more about like what makes this dude tick, right? Like what gets a guy through 20 UFC fights, right? And why is he still doing this? Like at the end, is this a guy? Because this has been my experience, and even on the combatives, some of the combative instructor side of things, is a lot of times the way they land into this stuff is they've been through the thing, like the competition, and they come out. And maybe they were successful at some level. Maybe they won a little money. Maybe they won no money, but they were successful in some accolades. There were some belts or some things there that they got along the way. But somehow they're still trying to. They want to get back from everything that they put in because they never really arrived at the result of whatever they thought that was supposed to be. Whether it was to be a millionaire, or whether it was to be held up as the world's greatest fighter, or whatever. But as soon as that happens, I think that's the last thing the next thing you realize is that you're not that guy for very long. Somebody else is going to come through, and that's now the favorite person. And so it's almost like when guys like, when I say guys like Cole, I just mean come from similar backgrounds and they get back into it. I guess what I'm saying is they're kind of coming into it bitter and in a weird way, and they come at it from kind of a skewed angle. And I didn't get that from him because I've worked with a lot of those guys, and that's why I say that. But I didn't get that from him. And in fact, we started going down a much more philosophical conversation en route. And I was like, there's something to this. And I really wanted to have a conversation with you on air back then. It just wasn't the time it was going to work out. So when I got the opportunity, so bring it back to everybody on the panel, when I got the opportunity, I was talking to John Valentine, who's put this really kind of the man behind the curtain, the Wizard of Oz with kind of this stuff. I asked him, I said, hey, look, man, I want to help. Let's put some people together that are coming to this thing that have been so influential in your life that he talks about, constantly, and that are coming to the summit. And, what's some of these panels look like? Because this is gonna be something that really hasn't been done. Like, again, like you guys just went through your resumes, you just went through the wealth of knowledge. So, best I can tell is we probably have somewhere in the neighborhood of about 75 years or 80 years of experience, combined experience here. And clearly we can't handle all of that experience today. But my bet is you guys agree on a lot of things, right? Probably more things than you disagree on based on that experience alone. And I think you just mentioned one of those things was, we're going to come back to that, time out on that. So here's where the questions come in, right? So one of the things that I've gotten from my experience so far is the more cerebral way of thinking that this particular group approaches problem solving. And the most important thing that I think that I've learned, and I had this hunch and I kind of knew it or I wouldn't be here, and that is that what happens is the guys go through the experiences you've gone through, and they have to do that, and they have to suffer, and they have to make a lot of mistakes, right? And they have to and then they have to go to other people to find out, how do I make my thing better? And when they finally when they realize like that answer that I thought I had isn't the right answer, they're faced with this challenge of, dude, I can either sit here in my comfort zone, right, and continue to teach the same thing, and maybe sometimes it works, maybe sometimes it's good enough, or I have to realize that this is a brand new thing and I need to go out and explore, and that takes grit, that takes commitment, that takes intelligence, and it also takes the ability to work with a lot of other people. And so when the panel got put together, I was like, man, how is this even going to work out? Can these guys even work together? So again, questions being, I guess, like when we look at like how we're approaching problem solving, you mentioned like from the organizational structure, you mentioned, Tom, you were mentioning just like how are we problem solving these things that are coming back as problems we didn't know existed.
Right.
And Cole going from one fight to the next and then realizing that, okay, I can give back, or I want to give back now. And now I'm going to explore this firearms thing a little bit more, and I want to do that. And you're getting involved with the SOCP program and all this stuff. I wonder what the common roadblocks were, or I don't want to say roadblocks. Let's say you mentioned the term gates. What were some of the gates? I mean, you guys, Tom and Cole, listening to the organizational management or structure thing, what were the gates that you guys ran into that you bet you would agree on? And so without knowing if the guy next to you agrees on it or not, what were some of the major pivotal points in your career path that got you to the point that you're at now that changed things for you drastically? Was there a career moment? I'm going to start with you, Matt.
Yeah, I get asked a question all the time if people, because my program grew into the Army program, and I get asked a question all the time if I imagined that would
ever happen.
And I always tell them this same answer was, yeah, I knew from the beginning that it would happen. And I didn't really know that I would be the guy, you know what I mean? But I knew that once I started learning, well, let me say, so I was a traditional martial artist for a long time, and then a boxer and a kickboxer and stuff. And I, during all that time, was trying to train my guys. And I realized that the training methods and, pedagogies and whatnot from the traditional martial arts do not translate into military units. It's just like, the training method and the pedagogy that you use in a boxing gym is not going to work in an infantry company. It's round pegs and square holes. Like, it's just absolutely not the same thing, and so it can't work, right? So I was having those frustrations, and whenever I realized that it's what you can manage to teach within what their day-to-day life is, and how do you make it fit where they're what the actual have the training happening. I think that's the thing that probably separates successful anybody training any military unit from the people who are unsuccessful. And then I should say, like, most people have no success.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
right.
And most organizations, like, the way it actually goes down is somebody in the unit, trains at the local gym.
Yeah.
And they really, really like the teacher there. And so they bring him in to teach, and they teach it exactly as if they were teaching at the local gym. And then all the people who were already about that sort of thing basically get their hobby paid for. Mm-hmm. And,
we just keep doing the thing.
Meanwhile, nobody learns anything. It's like,
it's a social thing.
Yeah. I mean, imagine learning to fight in a one-day seminar, right? Like it's just like learning basketball in a one-day seminar. It's like you've never dribbled the ball before. We can't teach you to play basketball in a day, right? So that we call that doctrinally in the Army terminating training. You hire the local guy, he comes in and teaches a whiz-bang class. It's just like giving a seminar to people who don't know how to fight. It's like, okay, you got the UFC champion, he taught these really bitchin' techniques about how to fight off the cage, but nobody in the room knows how to pummel. So, you know what I mean? Like, so that's that. I think that was probably the biggest thing that I learned was you have to work within what's possible, and have to work within the, what's going on in the organization. You know what I mean? So,
man, there's so many similarities. Again, talking with all the guys I talked about last night, I was talking with Matt Pranka. And he mentioned that he was actually the question was posed by Jeff from Tenacor, Jeff Mal, and he was talking about how he got to where he was at the level that he's at as a shooter. It was specifically around shooting, and one of the first things Matt said was the first thing I had to do is I had to realize what was actually possible. Somebody had to show me that. I had to see somebody do it and go, I had no idea that was even a thing. Right now I have to go out and chase it. But what I heard you said was, and then that turned into a mindset shift.
Yeah.
Like, now I have to wrap my mind around, I can do that thing. If somebody else can do it, I can do it. And I'm going to go do it. And then along the way, I actually changed that a lot, but it also has changed the way a lot of people maybe even instruct shooting, because he's been chasing this thing and he's made the commitment to it and he's gone down it. So going back to what you said about, no, I knew, I didn't really know.
Yeah.
But just what you're telling yourself is, I am going to do this. And that's the mission thing. I imagine, well, I'll come back to this. There's another question I have, but I'm going to jump over cold and go to you, Tom, just with kind of the similar question with regard to, were there points or any points where you realized what you were training? I mean, I imagine, like, in the competitive world where, in comparison, you got guys that are going on deployments, and the amount of hand-to-hand contacts that they're having are going to be much less than the ones that you're having, because if you're doing 20 UFC fights, that thing changes a little bit. What were pivotal moments along there where you're just like, holy shit, I'm doing the wrong thing right now?
For the combatives community specifically, yeah. I mean, there's many, I'm sure, that you can assume from my background. I got to start kind of like at the beginning of like how I got into this stuff. My first trainer that Matt would know, Mr. Cam McCarg, he was a unique person. So I started training with this guy when I was 19, and we would do grappling with weapons or multiple attacker grappling. This guy did not have any type of like service background or anything like that. He was just a very unique martial artist. And so while we were preparing for MMA fights, he's like, no, you got to be a martial artist too. You got to do this stuff. So we didn't call it combatives. We were just training with weapons. We just called it martial arts. It was not, combatives,
Which it is.
Right. It's self-defense for dudes, if that's how you want. It's like it is.
Simplified.
So that was my exposure, and then I ended up going to American Top Team. But prior to that, I had like a teammate at the time. He was law enforcement, former mill guy, and I was just like, oh, I want to be doing this later. And he just had said, you'll never get in. And he wasn't telling me you're not capable of doing this. He said that these communities won't respect you unless you did what they do. And in law enforcement, I'm sure you can imagine specifically that's a big thing for them. Why is this guy teaching us anything when he was never a cop? And then at the mill level, it does happen. The higher level you go up, these things matter less and less to high level thinkers and individuals, right? But I already knew I wanted to do it, and I'm kind of like hearing stuff that's shutting me down. Well, I go to top team, and I'm getting in the UFC, and then I have some guys that were out at FLETC, and they basically told me the same thing. Like, you either need to go join or you need to be a cop for a year, and then you can do this for the rest of your life. Like, you have to have some experience to do it. So I'm like, all right, and I keep training, I'm doing the thing. And then I came across a guy, Jim. He worked for a federal agency and used to have done like a lot of UC work, and then stood up an SRT that was in the South Florida area. And he came up to me one day. I was like, hey, I think that he saw that I was carrying, like in the locker room changing out. He's like, why you carry? I was like, because the world's a crazy place, man. Like, he was like, hey, we some of us older, Ellie and mill guys, we train with weapons on the weekends. I'd love to pick your brain. And I'd already done some like day contract stuff with like some PDs and stuff like that. Okay. And I was like, oh, I love that stuff. So yeah, I'll come by. And that was maybe 2011. And that was like, oh, well, this is just going to be a serious part of my life from now on. And then I guess around 2014, I started making it happen more and more.
Gotcha.
And I still never got any type of demand, despite the fact that like that was stuff that I was passionate about, and kind of finished my UFC career. And I opened up my own schools, right? And I had gotten a contract with a unit that was on my base, and I did a good job for them. And they had said something to the director of the Air Force's Combatives program, Dave Durnell. And so Jim was a big pivotal moment. And my first coach, Cam, was a pivotal moment. And then when Dave Durnell said, hey, we're standing up this master course for the Air Force, it's going to be the most modern, most complete combatives course that we've seen, but we need to like beta test this program. And it was like class 000. It wasn't even an official class yet. We stood it up. I went in as a student, and I am a student. I'm a lifelong student. But just did whatever part that I could do to give any criticism and constructions. I went and I learned all the career fields. We had to do combatives for SEER, security forces, special warfare, self-protection, a general AFCP, and then force-on-force applications for each type of career field that you had to do. And that was a big thing for me. And then Mr. Greg Thompson allowed me very graciously to get into his SOCP instructor program. I think I'm the only non-prior service civilian to go through that type of thing, at least unaffiliated. That was another big moment. But it's just still with the fighting community, it's very interesting because firearms, right? The military or law enforcement, they don't require you to be prior service to be a firearms instructor. Like, they want to learn from the top USPSA guy or PCSL or long range guy or whatever. They want to get the world rally driving guy to come show them how to drive a car. They don't need that guy to know what it is that they do or what specifically they're carrying. Same thing with jumpers. They're going to get the highest level competitive skydivers to teach them how to jump out of planes. They don't need to know what it's like to jump with a dog or whatever. It's like, no, like, in fact, they want you to not know. They want to see like the most precise level of technique or content or what they can get from it. But it's very important, specifically with fighting, that you know what they do to some degree. I'm sure you guys will agree, to some degree. And it's just with the fighting thing, that's the thing that is more different in that world, the mill LE side of the world, than any other thing that they might have a demand for. So
that's definitely true. Yeah.
But through those three major moments, my first instructor, Jim, Dave Durnell, Greg Thompson, those four things, it's like getting more and more contracts and things like that. And I'm just happy to be working. I try to focus on my community primarily, but I am happy to travel and help group guys or whoever the hell that I can help. Because I'm passionate about this stuff, as you can tell.
Yeah. Absolutely. But again, the journey there to just keep grinding and overcome the odds. Like, no, I'm going to do this. Like, no, you got to be good.
I'm obsessed with it.
No,
like I like to shoot. I like to fight. I like to fight with things that shoot. It's like, I mean, what's not to like?
I think I hear that a lot.
Yes.
People say that. Like I hear people say that they're obsessed. Use that word. They don't actually know what that word means. Like,
right.
Yeah, like you are the epitome of obsessed. That's what I got from my first conversation with you. But Tom, what do you got for us there, man, on that one?
Well, I mean, I'm sure, we have internal and external kind of defining moments. External is like what happens in the world that helps you go through this door that opens.
Something happens to you. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Some situation. But then you have all the internal stuff, which is stuff that you go through and you develop internally. You overcome some of your problems. Like I have, and I can think about myself as I was maturing. I had a decent amount of problems that I had to really overcome for me to become better. So there's moments where that happened, right? But, I think very similar, I was extremely, I don't know. I don't want to say just an asshole, but I like to fight.
Let's call it what it is.
I like to fight. I like to, I was probably on my way to being, dead in an alley somewhere or in prison or doing, like I was very out of control when I was a 20-year-old kid, and I was young, strong, wrestled my whole life, boxed. And so I was just ready to just knock people's teeth out. And I got jobs as bouncers. That's all I did was I just would go around and I would bounce at like whatever bars I knew I could fight in a lot. And if there were no fights or if the bar like kind of like slowed down, because the bouncer at that bar will absolutely crush you if you get in a fight there. And then pretty soon you're just checking IDs all night. And I'm like, I quit. And the owner,
you ruined it for yourself.
The owner would be like, "What? What do you mean?"
You ruined it for yourself.
There's no fights here. I'm not staying here. But that's not a good way to go through life. I mean, it's like if you want to do that for a couple of years,
yeah, weird.
It's bad, right?
Weird, man.
So, a friend of mine who I was bouncing with, and he was constantly trying to calm me down because he was much more sane about stuff. His name was Colin Ryan. He was like, we wrestled together in high school and we came up together. And he said, hey, I'm going to do some martial art training. And I was like, that's bullshit stuff. That doesn't work. I've beaten down 100 guys who tell me they have black belts and you just smash them in the back alley. And it just, you just punch them in the face. They don't do anything. And I think for the most part, that's true. Like, I was not a big fan of martial artists. To me, martial artists were guys who thought they knew how to fight, but had never been in a fight or something along those lines. And, but he wanted to go do it. And he said, come on, you're coming with me. We're going to go do this training. I was like, all right, I'll come with you. And so we went there and we met a bunch of martial artists. It was great. I still was like, hey, these guys can't really fight, but if you want to do this, like, we'll do your Kung Fu. And, but then going down the road and looking and meeting more people and diving deeper into martial arts, you find out that there's a whole layer of actually really proficient, competent people. Mm-hmm. Not on the surface necessarily, like not every strip mall karate place that you walk into is they're selling black belts or whatever, but there is a world under there that you can find. So eventually we found ended up being my lifelong teacher, Christopher Syak. And he runs the Syak system. But if I wouldn't have found him, man, my whole life would have been, it would have been short and ugly, for the most part. He calmed me down. He got me thinking right. he had me focus my energy on something that was going to be productive. And he really kind of steered me in the right direction. So I think that was like the number one thing for me. If I don't find him, like, man, I don't even have a family right now. Like, I don't have kids. I don't have a wife, you know. So that was a big deal, right? Yep. You know, I started training with him, and it was like I just would take all the money that I would make, a little bit that I was making, like as a bouncer or whatever, and I would put it all into my training, and I would travel to wherever he was, and we would train. And eventually, after years, I said, because I had always wanted to go in, like I looked up to the military guys, but I was so messed up as a kid, like the military would not take me, right? They were like, you're
a problem.
You barely graduated high school. Mm-hmm. You're half a retard. You're getting, in trouble all like,
thanks, but
we're not
thanks.
in a war right now. We really don't need you, mm-hmm. right? Like, so it was kind of like, it was more selective back then, mm-hmm. And so I kind of felt like maybe I missed that boat. And I had trained with my instructor, the head of the SIOC system, met a bunch of guys. And then I eventually came to him because we ended up eventually becoming teachers. But I said, I'd really like to train military guys, like how to use blades. And he was like, okay. I was like, yeah, so that's the thing I want to do. He was like, okay. I was like, so now what? He goes, figure it out. What do you mean? I was like, no, but like, aren't you gonna like
tell me what to do, coach?
Give me a number, someone for me to call. He's like, figure it out. So I was like, okay. And so that set me down that path. Mm. And, I was doing all kinds of training. At that point, knowledge, I had learned that knowledge was the thing. Obtain knowledge. Mm-hmm. However you can, obtain knowledge.
Yes.
And so I was after everything. I was learning shooting with people. I was learning like man tracking and wilderness survival. And I was like going to like all of these different schools. Anything I could get my hands on, I was learning. And I was at a tracking school. And at the tracking school were a bunch of SEALs who were also doing that. And so we just got to talking, and they were like, hey, what do you do? And I was like, I'm a martial artist. And they're like, cool, show us what you do. And I guess they want me to do a kata or something. Mm-hmm. So I just like grabbed some training blades, started working templates, clearing hands, cutting throats. And they were like, yep.
We want more of that?
Yeah, let's do some of that.
That's cool.
And, we end up being like under the moonlight in the woods at this tracking school.
That's a cool story.
Doing it.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey, why don't you come down to Virginia Beach? I was like, great, when do you want me there?
Yeah.
And, I'm not getting paid for anything. Everything is like out of my pocket.
Yeah.
So I'm going down and sleeping on people's floors, and we're training. By the way, I found guys who trained like we train. I was a wrestler. We trained hard. And what I thought is like most guys that say they do martial arts, they don't really train that hard. They train like 1 hour or 2 hours, and they don't even like hardly break a sweat in most cases. But some guys train like serious trainer, like they will grind it out. And SEALs will be like, they'll just like, hey, we're off today. We're training for 9 hours. Mm. Like, I'm like, okay, let's do this. Tearing apart like the inside of their apartment, throwing knives through walls, and like, they took down they rented an apartment down there, and they had an overhead fan, a ceiling fan. They took it down, and so they could hang a heavy bag from where it was. Of course, the landlord was
from
like,
the fixture.
Yeah, it was like crazy, right? The whole place was destroyed. But I ended up becoming close with those guys, and they liked the training. Mm. And this was like maybe 97, 98, 99, somewhere in there. And so that went on for a few years, and that was a key thing. Like meeting those guys, doing that was a big thing. And then 9/11 happened, and they were like, come on, we're doing stuff, And that was
and then things took off, and you mentioned that kind of in the intro.
Yeah.
I'm gonna change gears here a little bit, because having kind of given some background and me hearing some of this background for really the first time, getting a little bit better insight here. The next question I have here, and I'll start with you, Cole, is just like, why are you here? Why are you here this weekend? What are you teaching? Like, what's going on? What's the draw to Combative Summit? Yeah,
so this is my second year being here, and typically I get asked stuff like how to fight on the wall with weapons. We had a specific focus this year, and it was operating from the overhook side. So whenever you're in a clinch situation, it's like, it's nice when you have an underhook. Isn't that nice? You have inside position, you can foul their draw, you can make your draw, you can move to a more advantageous position, you can work a nice exit. When you have the underhooks, it's very nice. Life is good. But I wanted to do something where we had to give a baseline for a weapon presentation matrix that I developed. And then we had to work a little in the open with the overhook side, and then working support and weapon side when you have the overhook on the wall. And dealing with that type of problem where you have a worthy opponent, you have that adversary that's not letting you have anything, and you have to learn how to get to a good spot, just because. I think that a lot of times people want to default to fewer moves for the environments that they work in, but someone has to be the keeper of the content, and have like a massive move list, because different people need different things. And I kind of like, that's the way I think. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll do some stuff on the wall. Last year I did some different stuff on the wall. And I said, okay, well, what happens when life's not so easy? That's what we're going to do this year. So I did that, and I broke down the definition of what a position means to me. So that way in a practice, I tell people the purpose of practice is to build skill and identify their deficiencies.
Yes, sir.
So I kind of broke down, a lot of times people, they train and they say, hey man, how'd you get me? And they'll go, what spot were we in? And they recreate this poor amalgamation of what actually took place.
Right, yeah.
And so I gave like 6 different indicators of what actually identifies a position. So that way when people go to debrief or after action review on like the stuff that they did for the day, now that they have a better definition of what a position means, now they can articulate what happened and identify their deficiencies.
So important.
So that way they can increase their strength. So just to kind of give that as one would be a location. So a lot of times people think location is position. So butterfly guard or over under clinch. You have a very fuzzy image of what that is. If that's what you think it is, there's so much more going on to a true position. So location is one. Connection would be another. Do you have a 2-on-1 grip? Do you have over under? Do you have double? Do you have a collar tie and a tricep or bicep tie? Like that would be a form of connection. You have distance to your adversary. You have angle, right? And you have orientation. So, how do you have feet parallel as 1 foot staggered forward? And then, of course, the other person has all of these as well. And the 6th and final one would be energy or force distribution. So if you're flipping through a flip book on what's happening in a scramble or iteration of what's happening, and you stop at a page, that is a new position. You flip the page. Anytime any one of these things changes, the position has truly changed, and it's a new position. Might not be a new location, but it's a new position. So the last one would be force or energy disbursement. So you have potential energy, you have kinetic energy, and you have mechanical energy, right? So the potential energy would be like this. Like for those of you that are listening, my feet are sitting still and there's no distribution in any one direction or another. Yeah. But since we're trying to truly identify a deficiency or make our strength more consistent, we need to know where the distribution or force of the energy is going. So that would be whichever direction of travel that I would be putting into. And of course, the mechanical energy would be once you put that into the object is the other person in this case. So I talked a lot about that and then did some cool ninja stuff and made people look like John Wick.
That's the key.
That's awesome.
Yeah, right.
And that's what I was here for, by the way.
Right, by the way. And by the way, that's why they came too. I mean, that's why I will be John Wick by Monday morning. I definitely will be.
And it's kind of like a nice little retreat for me. I like to come do what I love to do. I love to showcase what I do and showcase the passion that I have. But I also like to hang around with other high-level instructors and other high-level students as well. So it's a nice little break for me. I love to do stuff like this.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm here too, is just to hang out with higher level people. I mean, I'm drinking from a fire hose, most of this stuff. I have very limited experience, knowledge, and practice in a lot of the things that are happening here. So it's more about having the conversations, observing how people learn, observing how people teach, and then also making some new friends, right? And meeting people that can be resources for me. So I get that, and you're approaching it that way as an instructor, the same way I'd be approaching it as a student and as a guest of the summit. Matt, I mean, I didn't really have an opportunity to connect with you at all. Really, you just got here like an hour.
Just got here an hour ago,
right? So, but and I know a little bit about what you're teaching because I talked to John a little bit about it. But share it with us, man. What are you covering this weekend?
Well, so let me back up a step and just talk about the summit and the Combative organization. So John Valentine, who's the main guy organizing all this, has been my student for maybe 10 years, something like that, and. So one of the things about the Combatives organization and all this is that, so we've been building a group of Combatives instructors in the Army for, 20 plus years now, 30 years really. And those guys, as the war's been going on and as the state of martial arts in America has been changing, imagine the expertise of people we have now compared to, prior to the war. It's just amazing.
Exponentially different. Yeah.
So all those things were happening kind of simultaneously, and they were happening, within the Army. There's this large group of people now who are, career martial arts teachers specifically for units in the Army, and now, of course, those people are all, black belt level guys with 6 or 8 years of combat and have trained large organizations. And so that crew of people started all talking several years ago and noticing mostly that it wasn't like just the Army where this thing was going on, where this sort of organic set of American martial arts skills has sort of flowered across the country, so specifically in military, but also in police organizations and whatnot. So what's really happened is over time we've sort of realized that there's this skill set that you would expect or would like as a warrior to have the person next to you or the one who's going through the door with you or whatnot have these skills, right? So those are all things that everybody recognizes. We all like everybody to be able to shoot. We like how to be able to fight. We want them to have, trauma medicine skills. We want them to be able to, down the list, right? We want them to be fit. We want them to, et cetera. And so we noticed that this is emerging, because we train with SEALs and very similar skill sets from people, and so as the sort of nucleus of what would become the Combatives organization, those guys, all these black belts, started reaching out to other people that were doing the same thing and saying, what we would really like to do is create a community of people who are on this same track. You know what I mean? And there's a little bit more to why we would do that than is obvious. So imagine, without getting too deep into it, imagine, we've had this problem with mental health of soldiers, sailors, Marines and whatnot. It's mostly not people who are active in what they're doing. You know what I mean? Like, for example, we don't have a suicide problem of active duty soldiers, really, because active duty soldiers are busy, fighting the war, whatnot. They're focused, they have a mission.
I'm with you. Yep.
So most of those problems actually manifest later. They manifest when you get out and you retire or whatnot. And then at that point, that's when people, like most people, lose their sense of mission. So they have I was in a special forces guy, 2 years ago, and now what am I doing? Well, now I'm a male nurse or something, working at the hospital or whatever kind of jobs that you find to be able to support yourself as a civilian guy. And so I don't know if the audience probably knows that. I didn't mention this earlier, but my academic training is that I'm a psychologist, right? I'm not a clinical psychologist. I'm not really the kind that helps people, you know what I mean? More like the kind that tries to understand what's going on with people, in combat. So I'm a combat psychologist, and I take an evolutionary approach to it and to the task. And like the whole field of evolutionary psychology is mostly about boy-girl issues and mate selection and all that kind of crap. Mine is all about coalition formation and the dynamics of, so with all that being said, right?
That is a little different, right? Now that you explain it a little bit better.
Yeah. It's less about mating, right? So, but with all that being said, the problem with soldiers and sailors, Marines, et cetera, with the warrior class is when they lose that sense of mission. Mm-hmm. Okay, so a lot of what the expansion into the civilian realm that we started reaching out to these people doing similar things was to start trying to attack from a cultural perspective this problem, right? So imagine how do we give back that sense of mission to people? How do we make it where when you leave that, you don't lose that sense of mission? And so that's actually one of the main purposes behind the whole combatives organization, and to get everybody together is one of the main reasons behind like the effort to get everybody together. And the way you do it is, or the way we intend to do it is like spread. Remember I was saying earlier about how you attack an organization. You first learn about the culture, then you make an approach that fits within the culture, and then will have a transitioning effect or a transformational effect on the culture over time, so that you build this warrior culture, and so that everybody gets a value system that's going to support the mission and excellence, et cetera. So that same approach, imagine attached to, like, first off, the veterans community, because we have all these guys who are mostly, I'm 57 years old now, so like a lot of these guys are retired soldiers now, and they fought the war for all these years and whatnot, and so how do we use that as a catalyst to then be able to attack the veterans community, and to help solve this problem of loss of a sense of mission, and then start to use that to expand it to the rest of our culture, at large in America. You know what I mean? So just kind of imagine, for example, imagine the idea that, not to bag on Dave Grossman, but I'm going to have to at some point, so I'll just start in with that now. So
do it.
Remember the whole sheepdog analogy. You know what I mean? Grossman used to say, there's sheeps and wolves and sheepdogs and okay. So there's some utility in that analogy, right? But there's some problems with it as well, and the main problem with it is, sheepdogs don't really give a shit about sheep, and so if you're setting people up to be separate from the flock, so to speak, you know what I mean? And like I said, I should go back. There's a good Christian analogy there. Why do sheepdogs protect the herd? It's not because they care about sheep; they care about the shepherd, right? So they're trying to do it for the shepherd. So that's like a good Christian analogy, right? So, but like I said, sheepdogs don't really care about sheep. So if there was no shepherd around, they'd probably be eating the sheep.
Both are true.
That's exactly right. So
maybe you do the same with the wolves do.
That's exactly right.
Right.
So that being said, that ideology has permeated the sort of tactical world, especially the law enforcement world, and then that puts you separate from the populace, right? So I got a whole lot better ideology, and it kind of comes back to what I'm talking about is, imagine why, when the lions attack a herd of Cape buffalo, right? Why do the bulls defend the herd? Well, they defend the herd because they love the herd. It's their family, right? And so that's a way better analogy, I would say. And it all translates directly into what we are as our sense of mission as men, and tough women in our society, right? So imagine why all these skills that you've gained throughout your whole life, right? What's the actual purpose of them? Well, the actual purpose is so that everywhere you go, everyone around you is safer and better off because you're there. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? If you just have trauma medicine skills, and you are someplace where there's a school shooting, you're saving lives when it goes down, right?
100%.
And if you're a shooter, a fighter, you're fit, you're et cetera, you could sit in the loobies or whatever, and everybody around you is safer and better off because you're there, right?
That's right.
So that's your actual mission.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So now, you were a special forces guy for 17 years, and you got out and you're sitting in loobies. You're still that guy. Mm-hmm. You still have that mission, And in fact, if you take that as bulls of the herd, you know what I mean? That idea of how we can use this group of trained people first affect the veterans community because we can give them back a sense of mission and we can solve a lot of these problems that people are having when they lose that. And then second off, how we can use that as a catalyst in order to train or to shift the culture of our country so that we start to like value those things among our people again. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that a man, or and I don't mean just be just men, because certainly it's the same thing. You know, the Cape Buffalo cows fight the lions the same as the bulls, right? You know, so they're just not as big, right? So, but a very similar idea, right? If we can take that idea that we are there to defend the herd, you know, that we have a sense of mission, and we should be, you know, training our young men and our young ladies to be able to be the sort of people who take part in the defense of the herd, and that we have that solidarity amongst us because we freaking love each other. Mm-hmm. You know, that's actually the point behind like the Combative Association. That's why I'm here, etc. And to that end, what I typically try to last year I taught about moral injuries, about how we avoid moral injuries by examining, without going too deep in it, without examining our so look, a moral injury is when you have a deeply held belief that gets destroyed by reality. Yeah. Like in combat is a window into reality, right? Mm-hmm. Like so people, psychologists of old, the 20th century legacy psychologists, they thought that war was the cause of PTSD, etc. Right? Yep. But war is the natural state of man. You know, human beings are a coalition forming species, and we form coalitions. Within our coalitions, we have fighting, but it's mostly hierarchical. We try not to hurt each other and kill each other as much as possible and we've enforced that upon each other within our stuff because we're stronger together as an organization. I mean, as a culture, if we do tamp that down as much as possible. But between us and the other coalitions, we have war, and war is, like I said, the natural state of man, and we fight our wars. In civilization, we fight them in ways that pull us away from our natural psychology in a lot of ways, right? So I guess it's a whole other podcast to go into that. But it absolutely is. But anyway, so that's what I was teaching last year, and this year, mostly what I'm trying to say is how do you build programs within organizations? And so the point being that we have a whole lot of people here who are in positions to affect the organizations they're coming from. That stuff, yeah. Right. And so if we can, continue to go succeed and ever expanding the number of people who are coming out of the service with this skill set, and more importantly, this value set of being combatives people, that will make our job of spreading it throughout the culture and affecting the culture on this sort of cultural, values-based level, and make it easier and more likely to happen. So that's kind of why I love that. Right?
I love the way you walked through that, just in terms of explaining how
it's fantastic.
It really is. Yeah. I wonder, and just kind of throwing it at the group too on this question, and that is, what does the process look like? In that sense. So how do you make that happen? And I'm interested in without answering that, because I'm sure you already have a pretty well.
I have some thoughts.
Well, yeah, I'm sure you've thought about it a lot. But I'll throw it at you, Cole. Like what? I mean, that's the. I'm going to come back to Tom. Tom's just going to get a minute to think about it. We'll trade off here.
All right,
we'll trade off. You like competition?
I'm supposed to come up with what he's talking about and how to make change inside.
No. Yeah, what I want to know is like the process of doing something like that, like in terms of what are the pieces of that. I think it's very simple. You want me to go? I'll go first.
Yeah, you go.
I'll do it.
Let me say one more.
Let Tom.
Let me say one more thing. And what I would say is, you guys are already doing it. You know what I mean? Like that's the process is what you're doing. Right?
You just answered it. Yeah, you're by being here, right, and is part of that process. What you're bringing to the table is part of that process. And that's. To me, that's the simple.
But I need a PowerPoint. I want him to give me a PowerPoint on how to do this. You know what I'm saying?
It's funny. Can I have a little intel? I've had some late night conversations with Cole. I already kind of understand how his brain works. Yeah. And if you didn't already pick that up in the way he explained what he's doing this week, and just like boom, 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 boom. This is how it works. I get it. Yeah. So go ahead, Tom, if you want to add on to that.
Well, I mean, I think the culture. Here's the thing: we live in an environment that has been softened,
for sure,
for everyone who lives in it, right? it's artificial. It's an artificial softening of the environment. There is danger in a lot of places, but it very rarely, for the average person, it very rarely rears its ugly head.
It touches them, yeah.
But when it does, you're either prepared or you're not prepared. For men, just to speak on that, a man has to feel responsible for that. Mm-hmm. Like if you don't have responsibility for when that happens, being a positive, an add to this, the positive aspect of that. If you don't have the skill set to do it, we have a saying like it's too late to sharpen your knife in the middle of a knife fight. Mm-hmm. Like you need to bring it already sharp, mm-hmm. right? Because you're not stopping. You need to have it sharp, ready to go. And that's anything that you're doing, right? So you need to carry your tools with you. You know, we do a lot of training with AmTac, Bill Rapier, and he has a shirt that says "Bring your tools." That's all it says on the back. You know,
if you know, you know.
Yeah, right. So it's like kind of like you know, I talk to men all the time, and I say, you know, do you train? And they'll be like, well, no, you know, we live in a pretty good area, something like that. I'm like, what's that got to do with anything? Mm-hmm. Do you train or not? Like, are you trained to be a man, or are you just being a human being, like without any kind of specific guide? Yeah, existing. Because if you're a man, then you're training to be able to project violence and protect the people that you love. And what does that mean? Well, it doesn't mean just thinking about it, right? But thinking about it's good. Okay, we think about it. It doesn't mean doing jujitsu, but doing jujitsu is good. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to be able to use tools because violence is going to go in a lot of different ways. You're going to have to be able to deal with multiple people, right? So if you're sport-based kind of fighting is you fighting one person, because almost all sports are like that. If you're a boxer or a wrestler or do jujitsu, like mm-hmm. in the world, people will very rarely engage you in violence if they think it's a coin toss. Mm-hmm. They engage you because they think that they can beat
win.
You. Yeah. So why would they think they could beat you? Well, they either are going to have a unequal time initiative, meaning they're going to attack you and you're not ready. So they go first and you don't know where we're going. Okay. They have an unequal force initiative, which is like it's two of them, one of you. Or they have the use of a weapon, which is also a multiplier. So they have something there, or else, I mean, look, they can be emotionally out of their mind.
Sure.
But the guys who are emotionally out of their mind, I'm actually not too worried about those guys. But the guys who calculate that they have an advantage and then try to push the advantage.
An asocial predator.
Yeah. And so they're looking at either they're going to attack you before you know what's happening, they're going to be using weapons, or there's going to be more than one of them. If your combatives program doesn't deal with any of those, that's the most realistic thing that you're going to see. This whole thing of fighting a guy who's right in front of you, we're going to ring a bell, you guys are both going to not have weapons and you're going to fight. That's not really the thing
that's a sport.
But here's the thing. There are all kinds of skills that you learn doing that.
Yeah, sure.
So you learn those skills, you play those games, and you go out on the range and you shoot and you strike, you grapple, you learn submissions, you do all that stuff in like a learning environment, right? That is one-on-one usually with equal time initiatives. Everyone starts at the same time. And then you add components of the realism, which is, hey, you're grappling. These two guys are grappling you right now. And it could happen at any time. Like you're going to be walking around here. Anytime they want, they can jump you. Make it happen, mm-hmm. you know? Or, you know, we just have sim pistols on us or whatever we're doing. But, you know, but if you don't have the skills already that you're going to learn with the more controlled learning environment, which is one-on-one, sport combatives, mm-hmm. you know, competition kind of stuff. If you don't have them and then add to it all of the complexities and the most probable predatory things that are going to happen in the world, that's the next thing, right? So that's what your training should look like. And so when I ask somebody, hey, do you train? they don't realize I'm asking them all of that. You know, it's like, it's not just like, oh yeah, I go to the gym. Like, who gives a shit? You know?
Yeah.
But
yeah, I think part of that, so about being here and educating, right, and putting those things in people's minds or heads about thinking about training differently, which is really what a lot of what I picked up about the summit since I've been here is thinking about the problem differently. Don't isolate it to one thing. Right. I mean, there's some bit of that in problem solving. Sometimes you have to go to the priority list and whatnot. But coming back to the mission and the loss of sense of mission or purpose, and going through what your purpose is and what your mission should be, and then part of it is like, well, what does that mean then? And that is, how do I train for that? What gives me that? Interesting how martial arts, combatives, let's put it that way, solves for that in so many ways in terms of that mission never ends, right? And you recognize that real fast when you start to get into it, and you recognize you're never going to know it all. You're going to try to perfect this, and guess what? You're never going to be perfect. And that is now the mission, to understand that isn't the case. There's this lifelong journey, and the lessons that you learn through that, like the grit that comes along with it, the losing, the winning. What does winning, as John Valentine say, what does winning actually look like? How much value am I putting in this other thing? I actually heard Matt give a speech about, I think it was at West Point. I may have caught it on YouTube or somewhere, and I don't want to retell the story, but I think it was just a little bit about the overvalue that people have placed into fitness versus the fighting, right? Or these constituent parts of the mission, which is to protect and defend. So I don't know if you want to go.
Well, so this is actually ties back in exactly what you were saying. So what I would say is that most people train because they enjoy training, right? Yeah. And so I
just want to work out.
That also means that mostly they train in doing just the things they like. And so we see the way, we got people training with katanas all over the country right now. And it's not because they're going to get accosted by ninjas on the way to their car at the mall, right? So they're just doing it because they like doing it, right? So most people who are training martial arts of any kind are doing the same thing.
That's right.
They really like shooting, so they're shooting. But
they like jujitsu. That's why they only do
jujitsu. That's okay.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah, and I think that what I was saying earlier about what you said, it meshes perfectly what I was saying earlier about it. You have the generic fighting abilities component, where mostly what we do is we use hierarchical fighting, like sport of fighting, but the kind of things we do within our culture. Imagine like, for example, when I say hierarchical fighting, what are you actually fighting for when you're fighting in the UFC? Well, you're fighting for social status. Money is just a proxy for that, but it's really about, I'm the tougher guy. I have higher social status than you. You know what I mean? So that's all what we do within our culture, and those things, if we're doing it correctly, or if we're wise about it, those things are actually a training ground to get our skills higher as we take advantage of that cultural aspect of it in order to drive ourselves to excellence. Okay, so, but then, part of why the combatives, organization is what it is with all these various sets of skills and whatnot is because that leaves you the guy training with the katana, right? Like at the end of the day, we really care who the best kendo fighter is in America, it's cool. It's like being the winner of the spelling bee to me. Like, it's quite interesting that you can spell really well. Yeah. What I mean?
I was a spelling bee champion.
I believe you. You're a guy.
Not national, but I won many bees. But see, that's about the pursuit of excellence. Right? When you put competition on something, anything at all. Look, when do you suppose was the first time that some human being sat down and ate 50 hot dogs at one go? Right? I'm going to bet it was after somebody said, let's have a hot dog eating contest.
Right after.
So competition drives for the pursuit of excellence. Right? So that's what we get specialized excellence, right? In competitive martial arts systems. And, so you can go to an IPSC or IDPA or USPCA match or whatnot, and just the skill set is amazing. Like Pranka was saying the other day, it's amazing. You see those people that are good at that, right? Fighting skill sets are the same way. It's got to be such a good boxer. It's amazing. You know what I mean? Okay, so that's a really useful skill in MMA, but it ain't enough. And that's the same relationship that all of our sport fighting stuff has with real fighting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, at the end of the day, we would like to be the best shooter we can be. One of the best ways to get there is to be a competitive shooter. We'd like to be the best striker we can be. One of the best ways to get there is to be a competitive boxer and kickboxer, right? We'd like to be the best grappler we can be. One of the best ways to get there is to be a competitive jiu-jitsu guy. Okay, so then all those things are wonderful components of the whole. Now, how do we make sure that that's in context of what the actual mission is? Because the mission is not hierarchical fighting. That's just the tool to get us there.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like you have amazing skills,
skill
right?
building.
You gained those skills because you were in that competitive environment. And now you're putting them on the actual mission. All that time, you were just getting better so that you could do that. So you can teach an amazing class today for people about how to fight against the wall, you know, like, because fighting against the wall happens.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like real fighting involves
people
that,
that
right?
only move across walls.
Let me tell you,
Right?
You're always fighting against something.
That's right.
It's very rare that you're just standing in the middle of an empty parking lot. Every once in a while, but
Put me in,
then
coach.
you're on the ground. So pretty soon you're fighting against the ground. You're fighting against something.
Yeah, sometimes people will think that like fighting looks like you're in the middle of a mat or a football field or a parking lot.
Nope.
And although that might happen, that's not the way it really
Super
works.
rare.
It's like
Not been my experience.
go look at any room, any restaurant, any room in your house. It's like, man, there's going to be objects and barriers and walls or fences or, you know,
All fixed weapons and weapons of opportunity.
or a vehicle.
That's what it is.
Vehicles. It's like there's stuff around you all the time.
We tell our students that, you know, the forcing factor, well, interesting thing. Okay, so the forcing factor for hand-to-hand combat in war is close spaces.
Yeah.
Right? So imagine with the more hand-to-hand combat in World War I or World War II. Well, World War I, because they were in trenches, and you come around the corner of the trench, you're in a small space with people, right? And so in open warfare, what happens is as you attack the hill and you're laying, you know, combined arms on it, you got machine guns and mortars and all that stuff happening, the bad guys flee because they're afraid of dying. And, you know, being afraid of dying will motivate you, you know?
Super motivating.
So, but when you're in a building, you know, it seems like you're in a cocoon, and next thing you know, you're in the room with the people, or they come through the door with you. So that suddenly you're there. Now, the effect that has on your training and fighting is, look, for example, in hierarchical fighting, the range of decision is the takedown, right? Who can afford? You know, imagine Chuck Liddell, right? Everybody forgets that he was a Division I All-American wrestler, right?
That's right.
Because he used that defensively so he could put the fight where he wanted it to be, because he was fighting guys who knew more about submission than him, so he was not going to fight where they knew how to do it, and he knew they couldn't take him down, right? So the range of decision in hierarchical fighting is typically takedown range, clinch and takedown, right? But on a battlefield, for example, takedowns are not a thing at all.
Nope.
Because you go into the room and it's an 8x8 room, and it's not going to be a marksmanship contest in there, for one. And second off, the takedown is going to amount to you pushing the guy over the furniture or up against the wall. You know, like
into the corner.
That's what really happens, right? You smash into him like, shit, I'm going to fight. And then bam, you push him up against the wall, and now we're fighing. Yeah. This is why that wall stuff is like such an excellent thing that, you know, most people, even you know, maybe more in MMA than any other of the games around, but jiu-jitsu, nobody's training on that. Nope. You know, like it's such a key component of the whole because it happens for real there. Almost every real fight involves that.
And then when you take some terrain aspects, and which are it's a similar thing, but terrain aspects. So now I'm on a wall, but I'm on a set of stairs.
Yeah.
So now, okay, little twist. Now I'm on a railing, or I'm up against a car. Like, cars are painted metal, very slick. A brick wall, you can't run someone down.
Coarse.
A brick wall. It's coarse. It grabs them.
Right.
But a car, it's slippery. You can slick someone down and put them underneath the bumper, right? And start hammering them knee on belly. But now they're shelved underneath slightly. They can't get out. You can knee on belly forever there, right? And
it's like the old days when the cages were flexible and you could
so it's like,
form around his
back. You start to get all these like little nuances to the terrain that make it like, you know, the more knowledge you have of these, the more you can exploit it.
And that's what we come back to is like, we talk about the environmental considerations, you know, and some of these contextual relevancies, but what matters there is like we were talking about skills and knowledge. Basically, all these things determine what you're not going to use, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you have like a big library of skills and knowledge that you said that like we have acquired, and when you start putting all this stuff in the stairs or the car or the brick wall or in kit or out of kit or low vis or whatever it is, or half naked on a beach like the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, but whatever that is, it's like now you know what you're also not going to use, and if you know what you're not going to use, it makes things so much simpler compared to that individual who just it's just chaos to them. You're so much more cool.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, look, I'm listening to you guys go back and forth. I mean, this thing's really going, a different direction. That's what I hoped was going to happen, was you guys are going to start comparing notes and finding those similarities, because all the time that I've spent with everybody, it doesn't matter what discipline they've come from originally, they all arrive at that. Yeah. They all arrive at what you guys just discussed. And they arrived there by going through a lot of different things to get there. There's a few pivotal moments. That's why kind of I asked that. And you guys mentioned like things in business or things in life, but part of it was for me in listening to. I had Ben on the other night, Ben Aubin, and he was talking to me about sort of how he was discovering things. And part of that was like turning the whole thing into a laboratory. And when I listened to these guys, that's what he's like, dude. My gym or my facility is like a lab.
He's very intellectual too.
We are just trying.
He's really smart.
You all are. Like, and I'm telling you, like, I've been to a lot of places. I've been to a lot of gyms. I've been to a lot of shooting instruction. I've been to some combatives instruction. I've done a lot of stuff. I certainly don't have the experience that you guys have in the realms that you have it in. But here's what I'm saying. The level of thinking, the way you guys just kind of walk through that, for the average person, the dude that's looking for the mission, he's never heard that before. Yeah. Even if he's a brown belt, right? He, at that point, like, because he's just focused on being, the black belt or whatever, going to the tournament, just winning the tournament, or whatever. He hasn't heard those things before, right? And that's the point we need them to get to, right? Like, and again, it's not BJJ bad, right? BJJ is great, right? But there's so much more to it, as you guys are explaining. And how do we get, so part of that process, like that's part of my question going back, like how do we get them there? How do we introduce this stuff to them? How do they know more?
Well, I would say they also kind of have to want it to some degree. Like,
how do we make them want it?
Yeah, because I know that's more of a thing. Because like Matt was saying, like sometimes like they need it. Yeah. They might not want it. Yeah. And it's like you got to have some level of buy-in. So how can we convert them to make that buy-in?
In your tribe, wherever your tribe is, your coalition, there's currency. Like, there's currency. This is a currency. If you do this, you have a status or a higher status, or you have there's a currency there. If violence or being able to protect your loved ones or whatever, if that's a currency where you are, everyone will try to do it. Right?
They want it. Yeah.
Right. So if you look at like just society has gone through multiple evolutions, and this is a natural cycle. And so from the study that I've done with it, I'm not a super learned guy, but the thing is this: we all started off as a society in a might-based society. In other words, go back as far as you want. There was a time when whoever ran this thing was the strongest guy. Like the guy who could smash the most skulls was the guy that everyone, that's the chief right there. He's a skull smashing chief. Now, that's how it is in society. Warlords and, whoever's got the biggest band, that guy runs this area, And then there's warlords right across the river, and they are going to battle it out, right? But he runs all the little bands where he is, okay? It's might-based. Is the currency, it's might-based. Now, they realize that every spring, when everything thaws out, we're gonna fight a little bit for some hunting grounds, some resources, something like that. And they realize that they kill enough of their warriors during that time to make winter hard. And if they can just say, hey, how about we make some kind of deal here, so we're not just killing each of our warriors off, so that all these other little bands might be able to take us down. It's might-based, right? But at some point, they make an agreement. Now, that agreement turns to honor-based.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to honor your agreement? Are you going to honor your agreement? If you don't, we're just going to go back to might. We're going to fight.
What are the consequences?
What are the consequences? So then the currency then can be honor. I give you my word that my warriors aren't going to attack you. You give me your word. Now, the whole structure of that culture begins to change. It becomes honor-based. That's the currency. And if your word is good, you have currency in this culture. At a certain point, enough people start to be a lot more prosperous. A lot more people are living through the winter. A lot of things are happening. But the only people with real currency in that environment are people with honor. They have a name. They come from this house. They come from this, this family, the family that used to be warlords. Mm-hmm. Now it's all honor-based. But the average person, they don't have any of that, right? So what happens naturally in societies is it goes from might-based to honor-based to like legal-based or human dignity-based, which is like a legal structure, so that everyone has rights here. Mm-hmm. Everyone in this society has rights, not just the people who have a name, not just the honor-based people. So that goes back to like a legal-based thing. After that, people start saying, well, how can I get more currency? Well, the law tries to make these little guys, have like a little bit more say. They don't have might. They don't have honor necessarily, like a family name, but they're a citizen. So how does that citizen get more currency? Well, if the citizen's weaker, he gets some special bonuses.
Mm-hmm. Special treatment.
Special treatment. So then there's a fight to be weaker, right? I've been in a class of people that gets extra bonus. Mm-hmm. So your entire society can go from might as the currency to honor as the currency to victimhood as the currency. But what happens? What's the natural cycle after everyone fights to be weaker and weaker and weaker?
It starts all over again.
It starts all over again.
Yeah.
So what happens is everyone becomes weaker, trying to find some advantage. And then what happens is somebody gets strong and goes...
Crushes skulls.
Yeah.
Starts crushing skulls.
That's right.
And then the currency becomes might-based. But where do we want to live? We don't want to live in either one of those extremes. We want that honor-based...
Somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle, right? So how do we make sure that we maintain that's the currency that matters, right? It's not... So being weak, we know that leads to eventually a might-based currency. So like, how do we do it? We have to maintain the honor-based, right? The virtue-based. Like, you're going to be judged not by nothing more than your word, your courage, your ability to maintain what you say you're going to do, right? And so that's where we need to try to hold on to that honor-based currency. How do we promote that? You promote it with your kids. You raise your kids up like that. Like, that's the most important thing, is your honor. And if you do that, I think that we can perpetuate this, like, generation after generation, but it's a fight to do it.
Yeah, you get the mission piece that's attached to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to what Cole was saying a second about, like, how do you get them to want it, right? That's the key, right? Okay, so whenever society there are things that you must do to succeed. Okay, so I'll give you a couple of little simple examples, right? So once upon a time, I had the chief of staff of the Army and his entourage come into our gym. And so I asked the group, who's the best runner in the group?
This is the story I was trying to recall. Yeah.
Yeah. And they all knew, right? And I said, well, who's the best shot? And nobody knew. I said, well, who's the best, fighter? And nobody knew. And so I said, what you're telling me is that this organization, people in this organization, actually place value on running.
That's
right?
the currency.
That's the currency.
Right. So why? Like, it's not like, and don't place any value on shooting and fighting, right? Although they give lip service to those things, but they don't actually place value on it, or else they'd know who was good at it, right? So why? Because it's not like they had a committee meeting, right? And like decided and voted on it or something. They all got that because they run collectively every day. I mean, they go out on a unit run, right? They all right face forward march, take off on a run. And a mile into it, when somebody starts falling out, everybody starts to lose respect for that person, right? Okay, so it turns out that run isn't just a unit PT run. It's not just for fitness. It's a social event that the leaders have created, and it's an informal competition. You know what I mean? And the person who's falling out is failing their peers, and everyone's losing respect for them in this. So that's what's involved in that. Is that you have this competition element happening. You know, so imagine so when you go to the rifle range in an Army unit, right? Who knows how you did when it's over? And the answer is generally like you and the person who helped you finger whip your score, and like nobody else, because nobody's tracking it, right? So, but if you come back from the unit range and you put all the scores on the wall, top to bottom, you know, humans aren't too hard to figure out. Everybody will walk up to the list and go to the bottom and go like, Larsen, you suck, right? You know what I mean? Like, and the ridicule will start.
They're going to let you know about it.
Right. And especially if you give accolades to the guys at the top, you know what I mean? Like the joke is, you know, let them wear special hats or something. Right? Like that's what the Green Beret is after all. It's like a special hats for high performers, right? But
also everybody knows what that means.
Right. And so this guy gets, you know, could be Thursdays off, or it could be special hats or whatever, but some kind of accolades, right? So now when you go to the range again, everybody's going to, this competition element will be going on, and everybody will start to place value on it, whatever it happens to be. And fighting, of course, you just get them fighting, right? Like if you're like at the end of the run today, we ran 4 miles and it was over, pair up and go, you know, whatever it happens to be that you're competing on, you'll start, you know, if we go out and I like, you crush me and you crush me and you crush me, and I'm starting to get a reputation as a guy who's really not maybe the guy you want with you when you get in a scrap, because, you know what I mean? Or it could be the opposite. You know, I roll through you guys and you're like, that guy's the man, you know, like, so whatever it happens to be, everybody in the unit will start to, it'll be the currency, as you said, of what it takes to gain social status in that organization. Okay. So in every society has these similar authoritative things. So I give you another like broad picture example. So imagine what chivalry really was in medieval Europe, right? What it wasn't was how you treat women.
Right.
What it was, you know, cheval means horse, right? It was the way of the mounted warrior. And what was the way of the mounted warrior? Well, it was the way you got rich and famous in that society. So how did you get rich and famous? Well, somebody gave you land in exchange for military service. And why would they do that? Well, because you're a badass.
Because you're a fucking killer.
So the actual
skull crusher.
Right. So the way the way of the mounted warrior was, how do you prove you're a badass so that somebody will give you land and you will be wealthy? And so how did you do it? Well, if you look at the source material, they spelled it out. You fought in tournaments, you fought in the jousts, which are sport fighting, right? You fought in local wars, you fought as a leader in local wars, you fought, you know what I mean? So you proved your worth as a warrior through this path. And okay, so that's what, I just picked that one because it's clearly about being a warrior, right? But every society has something similar like that. Right. How do you gain success in that society? Okay, and so...
But we've drifted so far.
Well, we still have one. It's just a different thing, right? So I give the West Pointers, you know, the students all the time, I give them the examples. Like, so what's the path? And they know it. They have to have academic achievement, physical achievement. You know, they have to like perform across all these things, and their reputation among their peers is dictated by these gates that we have put in, you know, structurally on purpose in order to get and to culcate this value set into them.
Gotcha.
Do you know what I'm saying? So it's different than chivalry, but it's effectively the same thing, you know. And so that's, you know, think about that from the perspective of us trying to establish the mission and make this the honor culture and whatnot. Okay, so that's, you know, in the combative belt system, you know, we talk about, look, that's the path. If you want to prove to me that you're somebody who's of value in a fight, here's what you must do. You know, you got to be strong.
Has to be clear.
I want to shoot.
Damn, I'm out.
I want to see you picking up heavy things, right? If you got to be a good fighter, you got to prove you can fight. You got to be able to shoot. You got to be able to prove you can shoot. You know what I mean? And we have methods to prove those things because our culture established them. We can, if you're you know, a B class, you know, IPSC shooter, hey, that's great. It shows that you are on the path. You are becoming a great shooter, and eventually you're going to be a master class shooter, right? Like that's how you get there, to prove to people that you can do it, right? right? And that same thing. Okay, you're a black belt in jiu-jitsu. Okay, that's one thing. You're a black belt in jiu-jitsu who has beaten other black belts in jiu-jitsu contests. That's an entirely different thing, right?
Yeah.
You have now proven you have this ability, right? You're a great boxer. Well, you got 12 amateur fights and 8 victories. Well, that's
Pretty good,
right? Like,
good.
so you know what I mean? So that's the path, you know? How do we, well, the first thing we do is we hold each other to those standards.
Same standards.
Right. We say, okay, you want to prove because look, the world is full of people, you know, who are served in some unit, who are now like a marksmanship instructor, and they never want to put themselves in the contest because they may not be that good after all, right?
No, because the contest will get you killed in the streets, man.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Well, and as you know, as we were talking about earlier, okay, you know, look, understanding the relationship of sportive competitions and real fighting, that's what we were discussing earlier. There's a relationship. Sportive training can take you off azimuth so that you're no longer training for battle. You know what I mean? It can.
But
it's giving you some skills that could be helpful when there's a game.
here's the thing. You'll be fast and accurate if you do this shooting sport.
Right.
Would that be good? Yeah.
That'd be good.
That would be good.
It's not everything, but it's good.
I like it.
I brought this one up the other day. It was my buddy that was here, Aaron, who was helping present yesterday, put this the other day, like the comparison. This is the practical shooting to the gunfighting.
Yeah.
Like, oh, yeah, they're not the same. No, but let's just look at it in a different context. For a second, just, you know, hear me out here. Like, well, a football player, a wide receiver, like, he's going to run routes against air and catch balls. Why? Right? Because it's a repetitive skill, and within there, you can refine the skills that it takes to run the route and catch the ball. And is that a game? No, there's nobody pushing on you, or you know, you don't have to worry about getting smacked in the side of the head or whatever when you catch that ball there. But could that be helpful when there's an actual game?
Of course.
Yeah, of course. It's just a simple example.
I mean, I think the people who make those arguments are they're looking to argue themselves out of it. I mean, I tell all my guys, my instructors, hey, we're going to go do a USPSA shoot, or we train with a grandmaster who's at the shooting club where we shoot, and they're like, oh, we're going to do the gun game thing. I'm like, yes, we are. Get your shit. We're going. And they go, well, why are we doing it? This is not like, I'm like, because faster, more accurate. Right. By the way, show me what you can do.
Right.
Like,
some level of pressure from your peers.
Yes,
perform
on the clock.
Creating that environment.
You know,
in front of us, and we're going to know how you did.
Right. Exactly, and that's all. That's all valuable. That's all valuable.
Yeah, and you can do that. I mean, and that's a really interesting way of looking at it, because it doesn't mean you necessarily have to go into the sport and compete at a tournament all the time to do that. In terms of showing me what you can do and what you did, if there is a tribe, right? Sebastian Younger wrote a really good book named, called Tribe. It was it's a fairly short read. I'd recommend everybody read it. It's semi-fascinating, but also very like simple. And when you walk away from that thing, it's like, okay, I get it. But when you're working with your tribe on a regular basis, they can create that environment for you, right?
Absolutely.
And
they can create that competition. They can create that level of accountability. And I think that's where you're going with this.
It is. I mean, with a couple of caveats, right? Like, so intensity is a real thing, right? So when you roll around in the gym, or you're sparring in the gym, boxing or whatnot, there's a level of intensity that's different when you go to contests,
100%.
So
pressure.
So all the cadets at West Point, they have to, they all have to box, and they all in their combatives classes, there's the first grade is like a competitive grappling. It's just like the jiu-jitsu contest, right? It's almost exact same thing. Well, they're training before that, then they do this training. Well, the final grades is like basically MMA fights, right? And so after the second one, I always tell them, what was the difference in intensity level between when you were rolling in a gym and when you were rolling for your grade in a contest, right? Well, it was much more intense. I'm like, okay, imagine how much more intense it's going to be when we're hitting each other.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, now imagine how intense it's going to be when you're fighting over a knife and somebody's going to get gutted.
That's right.
Right? Like, okay, so at that point, it's going to be turned up to 11, man. And how are you going to prep for that? Well, you
especially
prep for
if you've lived it too.
Right.
The whole time.
You prep for it by this intentional increasing of
Scaling
the intensity of your game you were playing. You know what I mean? It's like I don't know if Tito Ortiz knows the first thing about combat. but he'd probably be a pretty good guy to have on your side.
Yeah,
You're trying to fight, right? Yeah. Because he's got skills. You know what I'm saying? Like he's a hammer. He's and he got all that through the increasing intensity of the kind of competitions he did in his life. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's. I think that's something really. So back to our, chivalry as an example. Okay, local tournaments, national tournaments, tournaments at a higher level of available technique. You know what I mean? And then, we all know that all the people we see, Khabib or somebody is a badass.
Right.
Well, I never met him. I never met him. Right.
Yeah.
But I've seen him on TV.
He seems like the real deal.
Seems like the real deal to me. You know what I'm saying?
People would agree with that.
Yeah,
Paul, you want to weigh in on that one?
Yeah, no. He just said it perfectly. Yeah. We know.
Yeah. It's you can see with your eyeballs, right? You don't have to be there, necessarily.
Yeah, it's like the black belt. Did you beat one in a tournament? It's like, okay, you're a badass MMA fighter, and you've beaten some of the world's greatest MMA fighters.
Right.
Yep.
So yes, you're a great fighter.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable conclusion to draw. I wish I could talk to you guys for 5 hours, but we got things to do, and I want to move you on. You guys have been really gracious with time, but I do have a couple of questions before we go, and pose it to each of you, and I'll because you snuck out of that question and we made it easy on you, Cole.
Yeah.
All right. So here we go. Since you've been here, I want to know, did you learn anything today in your class, and what was it if you did? And then the other thing is what do you hope to take away from this for yourself? Because you are giving, and I think it's a fair trade. I want to go back to that book real quick with Tribe from Sebastian Junger, and that is one of the biggest violations that you can make to the tribe is to take without giving back, and that is a show of honor, right? And that obviously impacts your currency, in there. And so I think it's important that every instructor I've taken or I've talked to this week is already taking so many things back. So I think, and I just kind of preface the question with selfishly, you can call it that. I don't think it's selfish, but I think it's not an expectation. But what do you hope to get from it?
So it's multifaceted. Like first off, I said like it's kind of like a little bit of a retreat for me. I get to hang out with guys like this, but also I said I was a student. So I'm here to participate. I do want to pass off my passion. I want to pass off my knowledge. I want to show that like I'm a math teacher for violence. Like I want to give my perspective. But then I also want to talk with these types of gentlemen and get their perspective, and then also learn more math. Like I want to find what they're doing. I want to search it. I want to pursue it. I want to validate it in my own perspective, and then give it back to my students or these students like next year in a different way or whatever that they're doing. And again, like it's like a retreat. I do like to just come out and commune with the other great instructors and the students too. But like, just that's good. That sense of community. Like these people are here because they want to be here. Like as opposed to going to a unit or an agency that tells them they have to be here. So I want to be around like-minded people who like the same types of things that I like. So that's a check. I was here. I got that check. I wanted to be here to talk with these guys and be a student and learn. I definitely got that from several of the things, both yesterday, today, and then also tomorrow. I took some really great notes. So that's another check, And then just, I'll just say that it does make me feel good to be able to pass off knowledge to somebody that might actually have to freaking use it. Whether they, Matt was talking about a successful outcome, and like my training company, like that's kind of like the elevator pitch is like we focus on like Middle Georgia citizens primarily, but I want to I want to enhance the skills and the capabilities and prepare the user for situations and scenario where they may be the sole force that determines a successful outcome for themselves, team, family, or other innocents. And so these people that are here today, whether egress might save their life or whether they might have to take someone else's life or they protect their own their homie or their teammate, at war or in a movie theater when the stuff goes down or whatever it is, if knowing that I did my best and tried my best to give that to them where they might actually have to use it, man, that makes me feel really good.
Something I want to just kind of throw over the top and hearing you kind of walk through your process and what's important for you is also the acceptance of the responsibility that it's clear these instructors take in what they are giving. That when people walk away, like you said, like my job is to give them the skill that could help them in that worst moment when it happens. And there's a lot of responsibility with that.
Huge.
Letting them or having them leave feeling confident or not confident. Just I learned some new skills that I need to go work on to get more confident. There's an acceptance of responsibility to do that I don't think gets acknowledged a lot. And so I just wanted
you can't give stuff that's been half validated,
right?
Because that might be bullshit and could get them real hurt or worse.
Yeah, I think people listening that are thinking about getting into a school or what is taking shooting instruction or combatives instruction at whatever level, that needs to be vetted from your instructor or through of your instructor. Like you need to understand that stuff. And I think when you look at the people that are associated with this, like you now have, like if you've paid attention, if you listen to the show or if you're paying attention to the Combative Summit at all of those people could validate the people that are here, or they wouldn't come. They wouldn't be here.
That's right.
Because they wouldn't want to be associated with it.
That's right.
And at the same time, they'd be happy to maybe help you validate, or point you in the right direction. I'm sure, like, I wonder what Cole thinks about this guy that I want to train with, kind of thing. Those are the types of people you want to reach out to. Not saying I'm not asking you to give me your phone number,
right?
But at the same time, like these are the people. This is the room, right? This is the group, right? Yeah. That is taking responsibility for doing that at some level, as you were kind of putting together. And there's missions within the mission, and I'm sure that's probably part of it. So like, hey, that's a responsibility in and of itself. Cleaning things up, tidying up the loose ends, calling out the bullshit. Let's tell some truths here. Let's identify what those objective truths really are and explore those. And if we can blow those up and make, and find the new one within that, let's do that. So
yeah, and just to kind of add too, it's like to give a whole truth. It is nice from a business standpoint too. Like I can come here if somebody really liked my stuff, they might travel to Middle Georgia to do one of my open enrollment classes, or there might have been a guy on a SRT or a SWAT team or something like that, and he liked the message that I had to deliver, so he brings me in, to do a contract with his unit or his agency. So I'm not being selfish in saying that. Like that helps put food on my family's table. So if I do something like that, or maybe Matt said, "Hey man, I really like what you're doing. I already am teaching something. I'd love to have you come AI for me," or something like that. Also helps, and that's also part of that community. So just because it does help put food on my table doesn't mean that what I'm doing is disingenuous or unsincere. But that is another component of it. I just thought to give a whole truth, that also helps.
Look, man, Cole, that is the mission, right?
Yeah.
So if that SRT guy comes to you and says, "Hey, will you come to my department and do that?" You get to then influence that community to get better and be held accountable and do that stuff. So yeah, I mean that's very real.
Yeah.
What you got, man?
Let me say first, we were talking about honor and you really were talking about reciprocity earlier. Everybody has a sense of fairness, and their sense of fairness is really because we have an innate demand for reciprocity in our relationships. And so one of the things you see here is that, in the martial arts, a lot of people think things are proprietary, and they're thinking about this is the stuff that I invented. And the
I
stuff
haven't
that
ever
I
heard
show.
that. Right? I've never heard that.
And I would say that one of the things you see here is sharing, and it's back to your sense of tribe. So what have I got now? I can give so. The instructors here are I'm a little selfish. Most of the people instructing are the people that I really think have been doing cool things, and I wanted to learn what they're doing.
That's right on.
So so me and John, we talk all about who should we bring this year? And I'm how's this guy, right? Because I want to learn what he's about, you know what I mean? And I can tell you just from that perspective, I see myself more as a catalyst to this sort of stuff than anything else, So there are definitely things that from last year's summit that have moved into the curriculum at West Point.
Outstanding.
Because I met and saw the classes that people were taking in the thing. So, for example, some of your wall stuff that you did last year, we teach some of that stuff in our classes now. And the knife control concepts guys, their stuff is brilliant, and it's takes to, bladed work, the same energy as boxing and wrestling and whatnot, and some really brilliant stuff. And like that's, you know, what I think I get out of this is the sense of tribe and the sense of working on my mission, which is this spreading that throughout our country and changing our culture and you know, and mostly the camaraderie of the crew that's doing it. You know what I mean? Like we really,
it's palpable.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the guys, the black belts who created the Army system, you know, like everybody's like gives me credit for that, but let's be honest, that's not really what went down, right? I'm the guy who just sort of stayed on mission while everybody else was busy, you know, dabbling in the mission some and working on their track. You know what I'm saying? And so that's, you know, that's the same here. You know, like if you really want to have something that's big, if you want to have something that's like going to change everything, can't be about you, right? It's got to be about all the people who are doing it, and how do we get that force all going, you know, in a similar direction, and sort of corral it so it stays on mission together. Right. You know what I'm saying?
And that's really what it is.
Yeah, I mean, because like it's a great example. You know, like all the people teaching here. You know, well, there's a lot of stuff they have in common. Yep. You know, but there's also quite a bit of difference, and you see a wide variety of technique and, you know, whatnot. Well, that's like saying, okay, so what's the best way to train a high school wrestler? Well, I don't know, but I can tell you this much. We got a whole class of people who are professional wrestling teachers in this country, and they all do it their own way. And the crux of competition amongst their people is what weeds out what's not working and what is working, right? Mm-hmm. So it's those cultural answers like that how do we you know, build the self-sustaining system that's going to keep driving and be on mission? You know, how do we keep that battle focus? You know what I mean? Because we've all seen the martial arts. Like, look, is there any doubt that like wrestling and boxing and fencing, and they all started out as ways to like be better at personal combat?
Yep.
You know, okay, so what's the defense to the jab in judo? Right. Well, there isn't one anymore because judo people are all about judo, and they're all about the game of judo, and they don't have any battle focus hardly at all anymore. But that's not different than what's the defense to the rear naked choke in wrestling. Yep. Like it's the same thing. When you put rules on somebody,
go to sleep.
Yeah, when you put rules on somebody and you start, and your focus of everything is to win, it's no longer about being more proficient in battle. You know what I mean? So our part, you know, is to like be everybody using their intellect and their experience and coming up with all the best ideas we can have, you know, sharing them amongst each other because we actually care about the whole of the tribe, not just our little portion of the tribe. Understanding that works, you know, I know you guys are both commercial, but that has to take into account that we have a system like this where this is how we feed our families, et cetera, you know. Like all those things, all those pieces have to like move together in a cohesive whole so that we can actually reach what we're trying to get to with all this stuff, you know, and it, you know, like I flippantly say all the time, you know, the techniques don't really matter because, well, first off, there's a whole lot of people with really great techniques, and you see a whole lot of them here, right? Like a whole lot of them, right? Isn't that wonderful? You know, and they don't have to be the same. Right. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And if they were the same, if we were trying to like, you know, form this into the 87 throws of judo, we will be making a huge mistake because, in fact, just to give credit where it's due, Jorge Gracie one time I asked him to name some technique he showed in the class, and he said to me, "This isn't judo. We don't name everything." And I thought, well, that's really brilliant, right? Because the naming conventions themselves start to limit your thought.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, and it's a whole lot better idea to think of the way Cole was talking about, like the fighting against the wall earlier. Okay, here are all the various components of what this is, and they are all nuances. And what you're really learning is a movement pattern and then the sensory feedback mechanisms required to be able to adjust to these situations. Okay, so now it's like
is that what I said?
Yeah, it was what you said, right?
Good.
Right, and then
I realize how smart you are now.
Yeah, and like that's the actual crux. And when we teach techniques, right? Anybody's teaching techniques. What are we really teaching? Well, those techniques are like a metaphor, like a small snippet of the movement pattern that you're going to do as a fighter. Because fighting is a movement pattern and a sense of a sensory feedback that comes along with that movement pattern. And you learn that through experience, and we give you like, here's this little snippet of the movement.
Yep.
Do this a bunch of times, and your neural system is going to start to digest that, and eventually it's all ad lib, right? You know what I mean? I've been in the room before whenever like some of the best. My jiu-jitsu background's from the Alliance, right? So some of the best like competitors in the world like roll with each other and like videotaped it. And they were sitting back room going, "Ooh, that was cool." And then they went out and practiced it because they were going to teach it in the seminar as if they invented it.
They turned it into a technique.
Which they did.
Yeah, exactly.
They just invented it live while rolling.
Right.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Which is how everything should
yeah,
work, right?
because it ends up being that those guys just move well.
Yeah.
You know, like,
Weird.
wow, look how great.
Weird.
They can,
Like
yeah.
reality ends up building the technique rather than someone's imagination hoping to make it fit into reality.
Yeah.
Reality builds it.
Concocting the
Right.
situation and trying to train to this imaginary situation.
I asked my jiu-jitsu teacher one time what he thought of something. And he says, "You're a black belt in jiu-jitsu. What do you think?"
Right.
I was like, well, that's a good point.
Yeah. Figure it out.
Like,
Figure it out, man.
turns out I am.
Oh yeah, there's that. Yeah. All that hard work. All right, Tom. We're gonna wrap it up with you, man.
Yeah.
Just what do you hope to take? I mean, we had a little bit of a conversation about this earlier, but what do you hope to take it away?
The thing is, there's a lot of people I knew about, but I'd never met. So I'm like, hey, this is an opportunity for me to actually meet these people that I had watched on. Like, I'd watched hours of you talking online, probably, and I was like,
I talk a lot of smack,
but it was fantastic stuff, right? So I learned a lot. So the thing is, it's like I get a chance to meet people that I had only seen like online or heard about or talk. Some guys I talk about, I talk to online, but I don't know them.
Right.
I just talk to them online, and I thought, man, this is going to be a great opportunity to do that, right? And then you realize that there's many different kind of generations of guys here, right? There's older guys, like I'm in that older guy, I have some experience. I have some knowledge base. I've done a lot of teaching, but I'm past the time where I could compete or do any of that stuff. Like I could do it once and I'll be broke for a while. I might hurt somebody, but like I'll go home and I'll be hurt for 4 days, right? But the thing is, there are younger guys here who are just grinders. Like they will just get on the mat and they will be there for hours, and that's their energy, right? There's older guys here with a lot of good experience and they could relay a lot of information that I think is valuable. And I love the fact that you see a lot of those different kind of people at different times, phases in their combatives life. And I really feel like we have to think about this as a generational thing, because there are people who will not be here next year, right? What went with them? What knowledge?
What got passed on?
What got passed on? What didn't get passed on, right? So, like, did we transfer that knowledge to the younger guys? Now, a lot of the younger guys, they may not even be that receptive to an older guy telling them something, right? They may take offense to it, or their ego may be an issue, but still, I think it's our job to try to pass on as much as we can. If they take it, great. If they don't, that's up to them. But we're not going to be here like in 15, 20 years. I'm not going to be here. You know what I mean? Like, I'm certainly not going to be doing combatives, right? The thing is, I love to see the young guys who are grinding it out and can be on the mat for 8 hours, and that's fantastic. And if I could help them be in a better place when they're my age, like that will be more powerful for the entire country, like the entire culture, right? How does the culture not lose stuff? We need to have some interaction between the generations, right? And don't make them like have to learn every lesson that I learned. I didn't, by the way. I had teachers. I had guys that I learned stuff from that they passed down to me, and I'm glad that they did. And but I also learned a lot of things the hard way, and that you don't have to learn it that way. You can, but that's not necessary. And I think these types of these types of gatherings, there can be a transfer of energy, information, and I feel like the desire to do that. You know, only because I guess I'm past that competition stage in my life. I'll never wrestle another match. I'll never box again. I'll never do any of that, really, right? But I still feel very connected to combatives. Like I want it to be part of our culture. I want it to be part of our society, right? I think that we're missing it. So anytime I can, I want to get into a position where I can pass on that energy, that thought process, maybe some information, but I just think it's a great opportunity for us to be able to do that. And you know, I think it is like, you know, if you were going to save your country or your society, like this is a key component of it.
I would agree with that.
So if we're going to do that, I mean, everyone wants to, you know, go to war and kill the enemy, but a lot of times the enemy is just complacency, and it's just not having the right mindset inside our own society.
It's not having a mission.
We can win the war by doing this, you know. So anyway.
Yeah. I just, in listening to you guys, and it's been really fun to do that. You guys really carried this. Like I didn't have to really ask a lot of questions, and that's different for me. And I was hoping that would happen because, you know, as I'm seeing you guys are taking thoughts from one another and exchanging, that's what the summit's all about. So somehow I'm a part of that somehow. I don't know, man. Like
you did a great job.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Selfishly also, you know, when we started the thing, it was like me just kind of gaining some more insights, particularly on you two guys, because Cole and I had spent a little bit of time together. And I had studied him a little bit more, but just kind of listening to you, how you're delivering the information, because I haven't I've seen it 2D, you know, I've seen it online and I've seen the stuff, but it's always different when you hear it in person and you get the energy and the exchange there. That said, across the board for all three of you, I really want to thank you for that, because I mean, you can come here and you can sit back in the corner and listen, or, you know, listen to a guy talk and take notes and do that stuff. But unless you participate, this is my way of participating, you know, in some way, but also my way in contributing to the summit, which is contributing to the mission. And that wouldn't happen without you guys taking time out of the busy day and the, you know, the travel and the things that you're doing and the dinners and all that stuff that are going on right now. I think it's really important. And I just, again, in acknowledging things, I just want to acknowledge that. I appreciate you guys. This has been super educational and super, like, I think there's some inspiration that's come out of that. But again, from an intellectual standpoint, I have gained so much. And right when you think like, dude, my tank is full, like, and I've been drinking from a fire hose from, you know, with like a lot of people here this weekend have been, there seems to be like, I didn't know that I had more. Like, I didn't know that I had more in there that I could take more on until kind of listening to you guys go through it. So again, I just learned something new that's possible for me. Like I can cram a little bit more in there, and I'll probably again stay awake tonight, staring at the ceiling, thinking about it all, and I'll blame you guys for that.
I'm gonna sleep like a baby.
Yeah, probably. Thanks for
my conscience is clear, man.
Now I'm really not gonna sleep. Yeah, but again, risk it over doing it. I can't thank you guys enough. I appreciate it, and I hope this message reaches, you know, all kinds of people in all different kinds of ways beyond, you know, the sport of fighting or the knife stuff or, you know, the gun stuff or whatever else, because that's really what this is. That's, I mean, that's part of it, right? All this stuff's part of it, but that's really what it is. So thanks, guys. Appreciate you.
Awesome, brother.